in their countries of residence. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Qadri to the podium.
Dear students and participants of this session tonight, I feel extremely honored national law and being student of Islamic studies or Islamic legal science. I think you will be aware of the fact that this particular subject of Islamic international law, Islamic international law in Arabic is known as Ahkam al-Sayyar, and in modern Islamic terminology is known as Al-Ahkam al-Dawliya. It is further divided into two branches, public international law and private international law, as this division takes place in Western or overall the science of international law. Public international law is known according to Islamic terminology, As-Sayyar al-Kabir, Al-Ahkam As-Sayyar al-Kabir. And private international law, according to Islamic jurisprudential terminology, is known as Ahkam al-Sayyar al-Saghir. The first proper, comprehensive book written on public and private international law in history of Islamic law was the book compiled by Imam Muhammad bin Hassan Shaybani. And he was the most eminent student of Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa dictated him the basic laws, rules, commandments of Islam, and details regarding the public and private international law, and he compiled them in the form of the book. The first book he wrote on this subject was As-Sayyar al-Kabir, in the public international law. Second was As-Sayyar al-Saghir. Then these books were compiled by Shamsul A'imma Sarakhsi, along with the commentary, and it's known as Sharh al-Sayyar. I'm talking of 2nd century of Islam, I mean 1300 years before. Then Shamsul A'imma Sarkhasi wrote its commentary in 4 volumes, and that was much more comprehensive at that time, in 1111 to 1200 years before than now. That was much more comprehensive than the Companion on International Law written by Oppenheim or Stark or other modern international law scholars and writers. Then other 5 books, Al-Ziyadat, Al-Mabsood, Al-Jami' al-Kabir, Al-Jami' al-Saghir, and Al-Sayyar al-Kabir, Al-Sayyar al-Saghir. All these 6 books is very identical to the status of non-Muslims when they live as minorities in Muslim majority lands. This is a very interesting thing that in the beginning, the first few centuries, maybe 5, 6, 7 centuries, it never happened that Muslims migrated to non-Muslim lands which were ruled by non-Muslims, which has been never addressed directly by the classical scholars and Islamic jurists, because the period when the books, classical books on Islamic law and Islamic jurisprudence were written and were compiled, this situation had never arisen. This situation never arose. Rather, for the whole 1,000 years, because always Muslims used to shift to other countries or migrate to other countries where the Muslim rule or government had already expanded. The companions, their followers, and then their followers used to migrate from Mecca and Medina. They migrated from Hijaz, from Mecca and Medina, but they migrated to Basra. They migrated to Kufa. They migrated to Baghdad, where already Islamic rule had been established. They migrated to Syria. They migrated to Egypt. And then they migrated to Central Asia, for example, after the expansion of Islamic State took place, and Islamic rule and Islamic law was already enforced there. And so whether they migrated to Central Asian states or they migrated to Istanbul, which was known to be the eastern part of the Byzantine Empire, and whether they migrated to all other the African countries, whether they migrated to Maghreb at that time, Morocco. So already there was the state of Idrisiya state was in possession, it was already had been formed. If they stayed there in Spain and Cordoba, Islamic rule had already been established. So the Muslim had already gone in 27th of Hijri, in the days of 3rd Caliph Usman. And then the permanent Islamic state was established after the arrival of Tariq bin Ziyad. It was in 93-94. So wherever they went and they started living as immigrants, as migrants, as settlers, they went in Islamic countries where already Islamic rule was enforced. So this situation, the Muslims were the ruler, and the Muslim had to live there as the citizens of the Muslim country. And the non-Muslims, were the Jews or Christians or people belonging to other faiths, they were living as a citizen, honorable, protected and equal, having equal status. They were living as a citizen in Muslim-ruled countries. So they chose a very interesting subject. I was happy to know that they would have chosen the state of non-Muslim minorities in Muslim-majority land. But that is a very easy subject. Books were written on this subject. Dozens and dozens of books were written. Ibn Taymiyyah wrote on it. Allama Ibn al-Qayyim wrote a full-fledged book, Ahkamu Ahl Zimma. And there were many books, Ahkamu al-Sayyar, al-Saghir, al-Kabir, al-Mabsut, and many other books. Ibn Qudama's al-Muhalla, and Mughni's al-Muhalla, Ibn Qudama's books, and Ibn Abdul Barr books. Books consisting of 30 volumes, belonging to different schools. So not many scholars and jurists had been writing on their subjects. So this was a very good decision not to choose that subject which has been discussed in hundreds of books. So they chose a subject which was never addressed by the Islamic jurists properly, extensively, because this situation never arose in the classical or medieval times. In the beginning for 1,000 years almost. This position started just within 2 centuries, when the Muslims lost their own rule and started losing their rule, and the power and the rule shifted to the Western world, and the Ottoman Empire had lost its position, and many other countries were now gradually being ruled after particularly First World War, and even before First World War, the last century before First World War. The people started moving even from Turkey, from Central Asia, from Arab countries for their jobs, for higher studies, and they started moving to Western world, getting good perspectives of good future perspectives, the social, the political or economic, and then particularly in last few decades as refugees. So this is a thing which have emerged just now in 1 or 2 centuries. And these were 2 centuries. This is a time or period where the classical Islamic jurists or authorities, this was not their time to write anything on the subject. So we have to find this the answer to this question is very clear in my mind. I have no confusion on that. So still we have authorities, although this whole thing belongs to ijtihad. This is a subject of your deductive jurisprudential subject. It belongs to the jurisprudential reasoning. It belongs to your own deductive, legislative or legal topic. But we can easily infer and we can get a proper guidance on the subject from the verses of Quran and from hadiths of Holy Prophet, traditions of Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. Then from certain aspects of the Sunnah, traditions of Holy Prophet, and certain historical, Islamic historical events, some international treaties of peace conducted by Holy Prophet. So there are certain sources, original sources, which clearly refer to this subject. And we can get a categorical and very clear guidance from those particular sources without any ambiguity and without any confusion. So I would start that this subject, as I told, is subject of international law. And it deals with the basic relationship of Muslim minority or majority with the non-Muslim minority and majority. And we will apply it on the subject where Muslims live as minority in non-Muslim majority lands. First of all, the point which we have to address in order to find out the reality is to find out what is the exact relationship of Muslim as a community, Muslim community with non-Muslim states or non-Muslim community with a Muslim state. This is equal in both ways. We have to find out the original relationship between Muslims and non-Muslims as community, as society. This is the first thing which will answer the basic topic. So we have to be very clear that originally some people are confused today, and that's why the Muslim jurists divided the whole world where the Muslim or non-Muslim communities are living. They have divided it into, initially they divided into, some jurists started its division into two boards. They said abode of Islam and abode of Kufr, disbelief. Some of the jurists declared abode of Kufr as Darul Harb. They said Darul Islam and Darul Kufr. This was just a development. The whole science was developing in its initial evolutionary form. And some wrongly, I would say, some jurists wrongly said that Darul Kufr was to be declared as Darul Harb. He differentiated between Darul Ahad and Darul Sulh. If it is a permanent treaty of peace without entering into an act of war, so it was Darul Ahad. And if there was a state of war between two countries, and as a result of this war, or just in the beginning as the war was initiated, so the other country offered them for treaty of peace, and it was accepted, so a reconciliation took place. So if treaty of peace was for a specific stipulated time, after the war had already initiated, just to end up and seize the war, so it was known to be Darul Sulh. So it means it is a temporary, it is a board which contains a temporary state of peace. And Darul Ahad is a position which contains a permanent or a long time or a permanent state of peace and state of reconciliation or pledge of peace between the two. No war. So these became four categories. Darul Islam, then Darul Kufr, Darul Ahad, and Darul Sulh, the abode of reconciliation. It is known as Darul Musalama or Darul Musalaha. And then I found out, after going through the sources, these were discussed. I found out from the original Islamic jurisprudential and legal sources, and in the light of the text of Quran, there is another Dar too, state, which is known as Darul Muhayyada. it is Darul Hiyad, Ha, Ya, Alif, Dal, or Al-Muhayyada, like Muamala. So this is Al-Hiyad or Al-Muhayyada. This is the abode of neutrality. So now, the whole coming up to my time, your time. So how do I see? So according to me, all other abodes and countries and lands other than Islamic land, they fall all these other categories, whether they are in the state of hostility, or they are in state of war, or they are in state of a treaty of peace, or they are in state of reconciliation, or they are in state of neutrality. Since all these lands are other than lands of Islam, so to me, that division Darul Kufr comes to its end. It does not exist, because dividing it Darul Islam and Darul Kufr, it would create a mess, it would create a confusion and ambiguity, because there are 4 categories which fall with other than the states which are un-Islamic states. So I would divide in 5 categories, bringing the development of Islamic international law to your time and to my time as a humble student of Islamic international law. I would divide it that either it is Darul Islam, and then I will come to this, that what do we see by Darul Islam? Imam Abu Hanifa, he has clearly described, and which has been quoted by Imam Tahawi, which has been reported by Imam Shamsul Ayyam al-Rakhsi, which has been reported up till now, for the last century, up to Raddul Muhtar. All books of Hanafi law, and then other Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali and Jafri law. But particularly this concept was given by Imam Abu Hanifa. He says, but I can quote these references later when I finish this whole explanation. I would say, starting from this point, that the original relationship of Muslims and non-Muslims, the question arises that what is original relationship between Muslim lands and non-Muslim lands, whether Muslims are living there as minority or majority. We have to understand the basic and original relationship between Muslim communities and Muslim lands and Muslim governments and Muslim countries and non-Muslim countries, lands, communities and governments. So the original relationship, that is al-muhayyada, state of neutrality. Every single country originally lives in a state of neutrality. Every state originally is neutral, unless contrary is proved. This is the basic principle, and this applies to every single aspect of Islamic jurisprudence. As we say, al-aslu fil ashiya'i al-ibaha, that the original capacity and original state of every single thing is permissibility. Islamic jurisprudence is that we don't consider everything originally haram. We don't consider everything originally haram or prohibited or forbidden. No. The original state of everything or every act is permissibility, al-ibaha. Unless, and it would not be taken as forbidden or haram unless contrary is proved. Unless it is proved through the text of Quran or the text of the Prophet, peace be upon him, his tradition and sunnah, that this is haram. Unless you establish its prohibition through a text of Quran and sunnah, it would remain mubah. I have written a book on it, Al-Hukm al-Shar'i, on Islamic jurisprudence. It consists of 600-700 pages, and approximately half of it part, and there is a full-fledged book on Al-Aslu fil Ashya' al-Ibaha, written on Islamic jurisprudence, giving all schools of thoughts and the scholars what they have said, different views on that. But the Quran supports this. Whatever is prohibited, all relationships, whatever are prohibited in Quran, they are known to be haram. Then Quran says, Illa ma harrama alayhi. except whatever has been declared to be haram, everything is permissible for you. What has been declared prohibited, everything is permissible for you. So we don't find the positive commandment for permission. It is hillah, is the original capacity. We are supposed to find the commandment for its prohibition. The one who claims anything to be prohibited, he is supposed to provide evidence of Quran and Sunnah on its prohibition, on its being haram. And if somebody is unable to provide an evidence of Quran and Sunnah on its being haram, it will automatically be taken as halal or mubah. So there are dozens of ahadith sahiyah of Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, on this particular subject. And there are dozens of verses of Holy Quran. I don't want to enter into these details. But giving an example, this thing I quoted as an example, in the same way as the original capacity of everything is permissibility. In the same way, whether the Muslim communities are living here or the non-Muslim communities are living there, their original relationship is neutrality. There is not relationship of hostility. Hostility is not the original relationship. War, al-harb, or muharaba is not the original relationship. In the same way, al-musalama, the friendship, the agreement, the treaty, the pledge, in the same way, this is not the original relationship, because these are the things which are known to be the outcome of certain mutual bilateral acts and bilateral agreements. Either hostility will start, it will become state of hostility. It will be known as darul mukhalafa, if there is a state of enmity and hostility between two communities. If there is a war has started, somebody has imposed war on you, then the situation would change from hostility to state of war. It will become al-muharaba, known as darul harb. And if an agreement, peaceful agreement, economic treaty, the social treaty, the cultural treaty, treaty of exchange, treaty of mutual cooperation, treaty of settlements, immigrations, all these things are settled, they will become darul musalama, or it is known as darul musadaqa, musadaqa, sadiq, friend, musalama from silm, it is peace. So it will become an abode of friendship, an abode of peaceful association, an abode of mutual cooperation. Or if it is sulh, by the ending of a war, it will be known as darul sulh, sulh or musalaha. So this will be the third position. So you know, again, this is not the original relationship between Muslims and non-Muslims. This was an outcome of a particular situation. So neither hostility is original relationship, nor war is original relationship, nor the musalaha, the cooperation is original relationship, nor the muahada, a specific peace agreement based on peace, a specific agreement or pact or international, and you can say a treaty. It is not an original capacity, it does not exist originally. So it is also an outcome of bilateral act between two countries and two communities. So all these four things are not, they do not fall within the ambit of original relationship between Muslims and non-Muslim communities. So then what is the original relationship? That is the only one which I mentioned, that is Darul Muhayada, or state of al-hiyad, state of neutrality, according to modern international law, and the same does exist in Islamic international law. So when we start talking Muslims as a minority living in non-Muslim lands, the subject of tonight, or on the other hand, when we talk on the subject where non-Muslims are living as minority in Muslim lands, in both ways, their relationship, Muslims living here in Australia or any other country, as minority, but as a citizens and migrants, and they are living in a country which is majority non-Muslims and non-Muslim known to be non-Muslim land. So the basic thing would be decided on the basis of original relationship between two communities, and between a community and the state, and between the community and the country, community and the society. So the original state is state of neutrality, al-hayat. this is the first answer to that question which we are discussing today, that the original state is neutrality. So there is no hostility permissible for Muslims against non-Muslim majority. No war, any act of war permissible for Muslims living as minority, and I am applying it as minority, as living as majority in any state too. Here is the common factor. So in minority, they can't act as enemies to the countries, to Australian society, to American society, to British society, to Western society, any non-Muslim land, because of difference of faith. Well, these things do not depend on difference of faith. Here I would like to quote, Imam Abu Hanifa says categorically, I will quote the references, he says that the term Darul Islam, this is a very significant quotation on Islamic jurisprudence. Imam Abu Hanifa says, and it is quoted by Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, he died in 321, and he is the major compiler of hadith on Hanafi school of thought. And then it has been followed by other jurists of other schools too. And his book is Ikhtilaf al-Ulama, Mukhtasar Ikhtilaf al-Ulama. It's volume 3. I'm quoting here. He says that this definition of Darul Islam, he says in Kitab al-Sayyar, I'm quoting the reference from that book, and another famous book of Islamic law, Bada'i-us-Sana'i, written by Imam Kasani. This is book of law and jurisprudence, great Imam Alauddin al-Kasani, died in 587, volume 9. So he quotes Imam Abu Hanifa, and very important thing, he says that innal maqsuda min idafati ad-dari ila al-islam wal kufr laysa huwa aynul islam wal kufr wa innama al-maqsud huwa al-amn wal khawf. This is a categorical statement of Imam Abu Hanifa. He says, the great Imam of Islamic jurisprudence, he says that this division, let me explain one thing before coming to it, that all this division, first of all, is not based on Quran. You can't find a single verse of Quran which divides the humanity or the world in different abodes. First of all, this is not the textual thing. Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, has not divided the world of humanity in different abodes. So these two original sources of Islam, Quran and Sunnah, are not the sources which have divided the world in 2, 3, 4 or 5 different parts or abodes. This is totally a concept based on ijtihad, and it arose out of necessity. When expansion took place and the situation got on changing, and Muslims were the rulers and non-Muslims became minorities, and somewhere the Muslims became ruled and minorities and non-Muslims were the rulers afterwards. So when the situation went on changing, so it was the necessity which arose afterward. So this is based on ijtihad, this is a juristic thing. This is not textually Quranic or Hadithic thing. It is not textually Quranic or Hadithic concept. This is juristic concept based on ijtihad of Aimma and Fuqaha. Let me explain this thing. Now coming, that's why I am quoting about this division, quoting the Aimma and Fuqaha, because this division was not present in the time of Holy Prophet, and it was not mentioned in the verses of Quran and not in the traditions of Holy Prophet. So he said, the senior most jurist, a great eminent student of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq too, and senior than Imam Malik and Imam Shafi Ahmad bin Hanbal. And Imam Shafi was grand student of Imam Abu Hanifa. He studied from Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad bin Hassan Shaybani. And Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal was further student of Imam Shafi, the senior most Imam on Islamic jurisprudence, and student of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq. So he says that this division, or labeling it, some saying this is a mode of Islam, and saying this is a mode of Kufr. He says this division and term Islam and Kufr does not mean religion.